The real problem with Brian Williams is that all through the Iraq War, he worked for General Electric, who owned NBC at the time. They're a huge defense contractor. How many checks do you take from a defense contractor in the middle of an illegal war before you stop calling yourself a journalist? So that's number one. Number two, way worse than that even, is that Brian Williams would bring on generals, retired army people, or military people, to give us the straight dope about what was happening in Iraq, so that to inform the American public, so we could make up our minds with accurate information about what's really happening over there. Except that's not what was happening. Those generals and all those ex-military people he was bringing on to give us the straight dope about what was happening in the war weren't giving us the straight dope about what was happening in the war, because they were all on the take from the military-industrial complex. So they would all come on and say, well, we need more tanks over there. We got to get more there. And so they'd always want more war, more war. Brian Williams never told us that those military people were on the take, taking money from the military-industrial complex. Never told us, which is malfeasance journalistically. Guess the guy who did tell us won a Pulitzer Prize for it in the New York Times. After that story was published, after he won the award for that story, exposing Brian Williams and the NBC News, Brian Williams still never told his audience about it. And that's the real problem. Of course they pretend, of course they pretend that's the problem. Oh, that he puffed up his war record? He did a little stolen valor, which is what Brian Williams did. That's hardly the real wrongdoing. And now you're going to see you want to see war propaganda? And now this guy can't do it enough. So here's the night when we were, the United States started bombing Syria in response to a false flag gas attack. The second one so far that I've seen. Here, listen to this.
Go into greater detail. We see these beautiful pictures at night from the decks of these two U.S. Navy vessels in the eastern Mediterranean. I am tempted to quote the great Leonard Cohen, I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons. And they are beautiful pictures of fearsome armaments making what is for them a brief flight over to this airfield. What did they hit? What are you convinced?
Okay, so let's play that again and break it down for this soulless cheerleader of war, this corporate tool who is a menace to peace-loving people everywhere. War profiteer and champion, Brian Williams. But it's not just him. He's just the worst at it. He's just the guy who will do that the most. They all do it. They're all doing it right now. No one at MSNBC is telling you the truth. Hey, we're there because of a fossil fuel pipeline. And this bullshit that we care about people is exactly what that is. And you realize we set the whole Mideast on fire doing exactly the same thing we're trying to do now. Topple a dictator at the behest of the Saudis. And in Israel. Do you realize that we're doing that again? You realize we're trying to topple a dictator and then replace it with what? Who are we going to replace Assad with? Right now, the people who are fighting with us against Assad is ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So I'm going to play it again, but I want to get initial reaction.
I believe the plan was that Brian Williams was going to take over for Assad.
Yeah, I bet you Brian Williams could. So, Steph, you have a reaction to that?
It's just troubling because he's so eloquent when he's describing these weapons of destruction. Like, Killing Machine. Oh, it's so elegant and so beautiful, the brilliance of its power.
And he shows them, and this is what American news does. The difference between American news and, say, Al Jazeera is American news shows the bombs taking off. Al Jazeera shows you when they land. And that's what they'll never show you. They'll never show you the kids that our bombs kill. They'll never show you the 8-year-old we killed in Yemen. They'll never show you the 1 million people we wiped out in Iraq. They'll never show you the 500,000 people, kids that were killed by our embargo in the 90s of Iraq. They're never going to show you the people we tortured in Cuba. They're never going to show you any of that stuff. All the people we killed in Libya, all the destruction we brought there. Now it's a failed state. They're never going to. They never show you the kids, people we at the hospitals that we bombed. They never show you. We just killed 150 people in Raqqa. Where are the pictures of the dead kids? We killed them in their homes. We told them to stay in their house, and then we bombed them. Where are those pictures? We never see those pictures. So this is Brian Williams manufacturing consent in one of the most obviously disgusting ways. What a hard-on for war this guy has. Let's hear it again. Let's hear it again. This is
go into greater detail. We see these beautiful pictures at night from the decks of these two U.S. Navy vessels in.
And what a real news person would say is, we see these beautiful pictures from these decks at night. Now, obviously, the Defense Department wants us to see these being beautiful pictures. They want us to have a certain. What do you think the Defense Department wants us to think when they show us these pictures? That's what a journalist would say. Instead, what Brian Williams does was verbalize what the Defense Department wants you to think without a critical eye. He just literally does the propaganda. They were hoping that those beautiful pictures of their missiles taking off would inspire. And it worked like a charm.
And that was something that they were doing in the early 90s, too. I mean, they started doing that in the corporate media as soon as they had the technology to do so during the Gulf War. And you know what, Brian Williams? If you want to look at something pretty, I'm pretty sure your salary affords you admission into any art museum you want to go to, you sick, deranged dude.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, maybe you drop by the Guggenheim and look at some pretty pictures of missiles taking off on their way to kill someone. And I love how he ends it with, well, let's listen.
The Eastern Mediterranean. I am tempted to quote the great Leonard Cohen.
You're not tempted to quote. You're going to quote him. You're not tempted. You're quoting. I'm going to quote Leonard Cohen.
Guided by the beauty of our weapons.
We're guided by the beauty of our. Listen to think of the perversion of what he's doing right there. How perverted that is. Oh, those weapons, that'd be like, look at that bullet leaving that gun in Sandy Hook, going to some kid's head. Look at the beauty of that bullet leaving the gun.
Makes me want to quote Gandhi.
It makes me want to quote.
I mean, Leonard Cohen wrote one of the greatest love songs of all time. Like, I think of missiles.
We are guided by the beauty of our weapons. You're guided by the money that's given to you by corporate America, and always will be, and you always have been. And you are a menace to this country and to freedom-loving people everywhere. That's Brian Williams. Nice guy. Nice guy. Why do you think he gets that job? Why do you think they bring him back on TV after he was disgraced, caught lying, doing stolen valor? Why do you think they bring him back on? Because he's going to say shit like that. That's why. That's why they rehabilitated him. And how did they rehabilitate him? He had to sit there and pretend Rachel Maddow was funny for 6 months. And they sat there like fucking jackasses and laughed at nothing together. And instead of our lefty journalists taking the piss out of a fucking war machine, they're propping it up. Who's propping it up? Rachel Maddow. Who's propping it up? Brian Williams. Who's propping it up? NBC. CNN, New York Times, Washington Post.